She looks sweet, doesn't she? Her voice is soft, her eyes kind. She listens with angelic patience, nodding at just the right moments, never raising her tone, never forgetting to say thank you. She is every man's dream and every mother's pride. But what if I told you, and that's exactly the problem, what if I told you the sweetness is a carefully engineered mask, one she doesn't even know she's wearing? Carl Jung warned us about this, not just about masks, but about what lies beneath them. He called it the persona, the false self we present to the world. And beneath that persona, buried under years of conditioning and cultural programming, lies something far more dangerous, the shadow. But here's the twist. When the shadow belongs to a woman who has mastered the art of being adored, it doesn't roar, it doesn't scream, it doesn't lash out. No, it seduces, manipulates, poisons quietly. It hides behind smiles, compliments, and tears that never quite reach the soul. You think you know her because she shows you what you want to see, but Jung would say, you don't know her. You only know her mask. And behind that mask, something. Ancient stirs, something primal, something that has learned to survive not through force, but through illusion. So ask yourself, why does she make you feel safe so quickly? Why does she seem too perfect? Why does something inside you whisper that you should trust her, despite the little red flags your subconscious keeps trying to raise because you've been trained to ignore the shadow, to idolize the persona, to call sweetness good without ever asking if it's real? And in that blindness lies your vulnerability. She looks sweet, but Jung knew sweetness can be the camouflage of something far more complex, far more dangerous, and the most terrifying part, she doesn't even know it, because the mask is no longer just a disguise. It has fused to her identity, and now she believes she is the mask. And when someone believes they are their own illusion, they can justify anything, even cruelty, even destruction, as long as it wears a smile. Are you beginning to see it? This isn't about her. This is about the part of you that wanted to believe, that fell in love with the mask, because facing the truth was too uncomfortable. But the truth is coming, and you won't like what you see. You were warned, but you didn't listen. You saw the signs, the subtle guilt tripping, the constant need for validation, the way she twisted concern into control, but your mind made excuses. She's just sensitive. She means well. She's had a hard life. And like that, you surrendered your instincts to the altar of her image because she looked innocent. Jung understood the danger of innocence when it becomes performance. When a woman learns, consciously or not, that fragility is power, sweetness becomes a weapon. It disarms, it confuses. It makes you question yourself while she rewrites the narrative in real time. And you let her. Not because you're weak, but because you were conditioned to believe that pain wrapped in a smile is safer than truth delivered with fire. Think about it. How many times have you seen kindness used as camouflage? How often has the good girl been the one who quietly orchestrated chaos while the loud one took the blame? This isn't just personal, it's archetypal. Jung called it the anima in distortion, the feminine principle when it loses integration. When it turns from nurturing to devouring, not through force but through emotional dependency and subtle sabotage. She doesn't destroy you with violence. She convinces you to destroy yourself, one compromise at a time, because if she cries, you're the villain. If she's uncomfortable and you're abusive, if she's unhappy, it must be your fault. And so you contort yourself. You shrink. You rewrite your reality to preserve the illusion of her innocence. But innocence is not virtue. Virtue is conscious. Innocence is dangerous when it refuses to see its own capacity for harm. This is the modern shadow, not the monstrous woman, but the one who looks like salvation while feeding off your guilt. So I'll ask you again, is she really innocent? Or has she just never been forced to meet the part of herself she spent her life suppressing? Because until that confrontation happens, she will keep playing the role. And you will keep playing the fool. And the worst part? She's not evil. She's just unconscious. And unconscious women can be far more destructive than malicious ones because they believe their story, even as it breaks you. What happens when softness becomes a shield? When politeness becomes a prison for truth? When silence is no longer peace but a strategy? You've felt it, haven't you? The way her stillness isn't calm, it's loaded. The way her quiet isn't acceptance, it's control. Not through confrontation, but through implication. Through the subtle art of making you doubt yourself without saying a single harsh word. This is not love. This is psychological warfare draped in femininity. Carl Jung warned of the shadow not only in men, but in women, too. Yet society rarely lets us see it. We speak of the male aggressor, the tyrant, the abuser. But what of the woman who manipulates through helplessness, who dominates through guilt, who avoids accountability behind a mask of virtue? The feminine shadow is not loud, it's persuasive. It doesn't push, it pulls. And that's what makes it so hard to name, so hard to fight. Because how do you defend yourself against something that never openly attacks? She doesn't rage, she withdraws. She doesn't accuse, she implies. And when you react, she turns the mirror on you. Why are you being so dramatic? I was just trying to help. You're overreacting. But deep down, you know what's happening. Your soul recognizes the pattern, even if your mind hasn't. Caught up. You feel drained, guilty, confused, yet you can't explain why. That's the power of the unintegrated shadow. It doesn't need evidence. It works in ambiguity. It thrives in emotional fog. And yet, she's still convinced she's the victim. That's the scariest part. She believes her own performance. She's not lying to you, she's lying to herself. Because to see her own shadow would mean tearing apart the narrative that has protected her for years, and that is something most people will never willingly do. So she doubles down. On charm, on sweetness, on tears, and you fade. You become a ghost in your own life, haunted by a smile that once felt like safety. But now you know. This is not just about her. This is about the parts of you that allowed this to happen. The parts of you that confused submission with love, that mistook guilt for compassion, that thought if you were just good enough the sweetness would finally become real. But masks don't love. They only reflect what you want to see, and what comes next and will force you to see everything. You didn't fall for her. You fell for your own reflection in her gaze. Yes, read that again. You fell for the way she looked at you, for how she made you feel, for the illusion that you were finally seen, finally safe, finally needed. But it wasn't love, it was projection. And Jung warned us about this, how the psyche projects its unmet needs onto another and calls it destiny. She became the canvas for your unconscious, your need to be the protector, the savior, the good man in a broken world. And she knew how to play that part, not out of malice, but survival. Because just like you, she was playing a role written long before either of you were born. You saw her sweetness and imagined purity. You saw her softness and imagined safety. You saw her wounds and imagined purpose. But none of that was real. It was a contract between your shadow and hers, a silent agreement. I'll pretend to rescue you if you pretend I'm whole. And so began the cycle. She offered you vulnerability, but only as a hook. You offered her strength, but only to earn love. She praised you, then subtly punished you. You resisted, then apologized. Round and round. A spiral of unconscious need disguised as intimacy. You thought you were growing closer, but what you were really doing was circling your own unmet wounds. This is what Jung meant when he said that people don't meet. Only their projections do. Until you face your own shadow, you'll, too, keep attracting it in others, again and again, with different faces, different names, but the same haunting patterns. She was never your salvation. She was your mirror, a reflection of every part of you that you refused to own, your need for approval, your fear of rejection, your buried anger. She activated it all, and wore the costume of sweetness while doing it. But here's the twist. She was doing the same thing. She projected her longing for safety onto you, her need for validation, her father wounds, her cultural scripts, her fear of abandonment. You were never in love. You were in a mutual hallucination, And now as the illusion cracks up, you have a choice. Blame her. Or awaken. Because the truth is her shadow may have seduced you, but your unconscious chose it. And only consciousness can break that spell. The next chapter will not be easy, but it's the one you've avoided your entire life. This is the part no one talks about. The moment the mask slips, not with a bang but with a whisper, a passing comment, a cold glance, a subtle shift in energy that tells you everything's changed but you can't explain why. She doesn't smile the same way. Her words feel rehearsed. Her presence feels hollow, and you realize you've been in love with a ghost, not a person, a projection, a role she learned to play so well even she forgot it was a performance. But the performance is crumbling now, because no illusion can hold forever. The weight of unconsciousness always cracks. The mask, what's left underneath, terrifies both of you. She's not the angel you imagined, and you're not the hero you pretended to be. She begins to resent you for seeing her too clearly, and you begin to resent her for not being what you needed her to be. But this is where most people run. They escape into blame, into anger, into rebound distractions or hollow affirmations. Anything to avoid the truth. The relationship was never real. It was a theater of wounds, her pain playing with yours, your ego chasing hers. Two unconscious psyches dancing under the illusion of love, while their shadows whispered beneath the floorboards. And now, as the illusion collapses, the question is no longer, what happened to us? The real question is, what was it ever built on? Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This collapse you're feeling, it's not failure, it's your unconscious being. Revealed, the cracks you see in her are the same cracks running through your own soul. But this isn't the end. This is the initiation. The moment you stop looking at her for answers and start looking within. The moment you stop trying to fix her and begin reclaiming the parts of you that gave your power away. The moment you stop asking, why did she do this? And start asking, why did I allow it? The collapse isn't the destruction of love. It's the destruction of illusion. And from that rubble, something real can finally begin. But only if you're willing to face what you've buried. You knew. Long before it fell apart, your body knew. The tightening in your chest, the pit in your stomach, the moments when something didn't feel right, but you smiled anyway, agreed anyway, stayed anyway, because leaving would mean admitting something terrifying. You betrayed yourself to keep the fantasy alive. That's the most painful truth. Not that she lied, not that she changed, but that you abandoned your inner voice to preserve the image of love. You sensed her manipulations, her neediness, her covert control, but you rationalized it. You convinced yourself it was normal, that love was supposed to hurt a little, that your discomfort was a sign of your own brokenness, and so inch by inch you gave pieces of yourself away, not all at once, slowly, quietly, in the name of peace, in the name of being a good man, in the name of keeping her happy. But who were you without your boundaries? Who were you once your truth became a liability? Jung warned that what we deny in ourselves becomes our fate, and this is your fate. Now the erosion of self, the slow death of authenticity in exchange for affection. You didn't just lose her, you lost yourself in her, and she never asked you to. That's the tragedy. The shadow isn't always an external force, it's internal. Compliance, it's you silencing your own instincts, numbing your own truth, compromising over and over, until the reflection in the mirror no longer looks like a man. It looks like a shape molded by fear. But why did you do it? Because deep down, you believed love was conditional. That if you were too much, too angry, too firm, too clear, you would be rejected. That being authentic meant being alone, and so you traded your fire for acceptance. You dimmed your soul to fit into her comfort zone, and now you're angry, not just at her, but at yourself, because you remember the moment you knew, the words you should have said, the boundary you should have drawn, the silence you should have broken. But you didn't. You chose safety, and safety killed you slowly. But here's the thing Jung knew. The truth doesn't go away just because you ignore it. It waits, beneath the surface, growing heavier with each lie you tell yourself, until it erupts in collapse, in crisis, in revelation. And now it's here. The truth is no longer whispering, it's screaming. Will you listen? You thought the danger was her behavior, her games, her unpredictability, her silence. But that was never the real threat. The real danger was the darkness she awakened in you, the part you've spent your whole life trying to outrun, the part you buried beneath productivity, humor, niceness, the part that learned long ago, if I show my real self, they'll leave. She didn't create your wounds, she exposed them. She was the match, but you were already soaked in gasoline. Carl, Jung taught us that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And you saw your darkness in her. That's why you were drawn to her. That's why it felt electric and terrifying and addictive. Because your soul recognized something it had denied for years. She mirrored your shame, your fear of being unworthy, your hunger to be chosen, even if it meant disappearing in the process. And now you're angry, not because she fooled you, but because you let her in. Because for a moment you thought maybe, just maybe, this time it would be different, that someone could love you without demanding your silence. But the truth is, she couldn't love you fully, because you couldn't. Love yourself fully. And what does a broken mirror reflect? Only fragments. So you showed her the version of you you thought was lovable, the strong one, the patient one, the giver, the listener, and she adored it, until she didn't, until her own shadow swallowed her ability to see clearly, until your wounds triggered hers and hers triggered yours, and neither of you had the tools to stop the spiral. This wasn't love. This was trauma recognition disguised as romance. And now you have a choice. Demonize her, call her toxic, pretend she was the villain, or face the truth. Her darkness was the mirror that forced you to see your own. That's the secret no one wants to hear. The feminine shadow can only manipulate what the masculine shadow refuses to own. She used guilt because you carried shame. She withdrew because you feared abandonment. She silenced you because you already doubted your voice. She couldn't wound you if there wasn't a wound to pierce. This isn't a story of blame. It's a story of awakening. And the next chapter? You face the shadow, alone. So here you are, alone. No more mask to chase, no more dream to preserve. Just silence, and the sound of something moving beneath your skin. It's been there all along. The rage, the grief, the resentment, the emptiness. The part of you that's been screaming while you've smiled. The part that watched you compromise, contort, apologize, shrink. The part that held the truth while your lips told lies for love. This is the monster in the mirror. But what if I told you it's not your enemy? Jung said the shadow, when ignored, becomes destructive. But when integrated, it becomes power, clarity, wholeness. And right now, that darkness inside you, it's not here to hurt you. It's here to save you. But first, it must burn everything false. Every script you inherited about what a man should be. Every fake smile you gave just to avoid conflict. Every time you stayed silent to be the bigger person. Every apology you made for simply existing, burn it, let it collapse. Because beneath the ashes is something ancient, something sacred. The real you, untamed, raw, imperfect, alive. The man who doesn't beg to be loved but dares to be known. The man who speaks truth, even when it shakes. The man who would rather be alone than adored for a mask. You see, the feminine shadow isn't your prison unless you choose to stay inside it. The real trap was never her. It was your need to be the good one, to be chosen, to be accepted. But awakening isn't about being chosen. It's about choosing yourself. And you can't do that without making peace with your shadow, without honoring the anger you were told to suppress, without listening to the grief you buried under logic, without letting the pain teach you what love never did, that you were never too much. You were just too awake for a world that profits from numbness. So let them call you selfish, cold, harsh. Let them say you've changed, because you have. You finally met the monster and discovered it was never a monster. It was a warrior in chains. And now, he's free. Let's speak plainly now. The nice guy is dead, not the kind man, not the loving man, not the man with integrity. No, those are sacred. But the nice guy? The man who performs goodness like a ritual sacrifice, who bleeds quietly in exchange for crumbs of affection, who chokes on his truth just to keep the peace. That man must die, and in your case he just did. Because now you see the truth, he was never good. He was obedient, controlled, fearful. He made himself small and called it virtue. He offered the world a curated version of himself and called it love. But deep down, he was resentful, angry, hollow. Jung would say he was possessed by a false persona, a mask so convincing even he believed it. But masks can't hold love. Only presence can, only truth can, and the nice guy never gave you that. He gave you acceptance bought through self-erasure. So let him die. Let the people who needed him mourn his absence. Let the women who thrived off his compliance feel his silence. Let the world that rewarded his obedience shudder when it meets your gaze now, clear, unshaken, no longer begging to belong. Because the man who rises in his place is something the world fears. A man who remembers himself, not the boy chasing approval, not the puppet of feminine expectation, not the shell of unmet childhood, longing, but the self, the integrated whole. He can love fiercely without abandoning himself. He can stay open without being weak. He can be gentle and immovable, because he no longer fears his own darkness. He doesn't project it onto others. He doesn't need a sweet mask to feel safe. He doesn't mistake manipulation for intimacy. He sees clearly now that sweetness without depth is strategy. That obedience without soul is slavery. That love without boundaries is self-destruction. And most of all, that the real man isn't the one who's liked. He's the one who's whole. This is your emergence. And as you walk out of the ruins of your former self, remember, she wasn't your enemy. She was the fire that forged you. You don't hate her anymore. You don't need to, because hate is the residue of attachment, the echo of expectation unmet. And now the illusion is gone, the longing is gone, the fantasy is dead. What's left is clarity and a strange kind of peace. You see her now, not as a villain, not as a savior, but as a mirror, a teacher. A wound wrapped in perfume and pleasantries, yes, but a wound no less real than yours. Her sweetness was never the problem, your blindness to it was. Her softness was never the trap, your hunger for it was. You both played roles, you both acted, from pain, and now Saudi it ends. Not in revenge, not in dramatic closure, but in the quiet decision to walk away without needing her to understand. Because healing isn't about being understood by the person who hurt you. It's about understanding yourself enough to never need that again. Jung would say this is individuation, not the pursuit of perfection, but the reunion with your soul, the integration of all you are, the sacred and the savage, the holy and the haunted, the man who weeps and the man who roars, and now you walk forward, not to find a better woman, not to prove you've changed, but to meet yourself in the places you once abandoned, to speak truth where you once went silent, to hold your line when guilt comes knocking, to honor your anger without weaponizing it, to love without losing yourself. Because the shadow doesn't disappear. It integrates. It sits at the table now, not as a threat, but as a guardian. You are no longer divided. You are no longer performing. You are no longer prey to a smile. And when the next woman comes, because you won't be looking for salvation. You'll be looking for depth, for consciousness, for someone who's met their own demons, danced with them, named them, and lived to tell the story. Because love without shadow is just fantasy, and fantasy is for the man you used to be. You are something else now, something the world doesn't know how to name, something terrifying, holy and whole, something she never got to see. But you will, and that is enough. You are free now.